Kurumi Wendy is a character from the video game Master Detective Archive's Rain Code. She's introduced in Chapter 2 and sticks around for the rest of the game. Although not a detective, she acts as Kanai Ward's only informant, and she is the source of valuable pieces of information throughout the story. Kurumi also plays an important supportive role to Yuma, the protagonist, by reassuring him whenever he starts to doubt himself. She can debatably be considered part of the main cast. At least I would personally place her among the group. She, at the very least, has a more constant presence than some of the other detectives who tend to feature heavily in one chapter and then just take a back seat outside of that chapter. Let's dive right in and take a closer look at Kurumi, shall we? Kurumi's first name is the Japanese word for walnut. Walnuts are often used as symbols of intelligence and wisdom. This would fit Kurumi, as she's shown to be pretty clever and smart, even to the point that Yuma says she's better suited to be a detective than him. Kurumi is also a Japanese name, but there are many different ways to write it in kanji. As in, there's too many different forms of it for me to cover right here. It can also just be written in hiragana, which has no inherent meaning. The most fitting kanji combination I saw for the name joins the character for come or arrive with the character for light or radiance. This could reference how she's a consistent source of optimism and motivation for Yuma. Kurumi's last name, Wendy, is a bit trickier, but only because it has an unexpectedly odd origin story. Wendy as a name primarily became known because of J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, in which one of the main characters has the name. Barrie took the name from a nickname a childhood friend of his gave him, Fwendy. The nickname came from the word friend, and it sounded odd because his childhood friend had trouble pronouncing R's. In this sense, Wendy as a name is often taken to mean friend. This would fit Kurumi because she's very friendly and quick to get along with people. Wendy was a name before Peter Pan, though, but it was used very rarely. It could be related to names like Gwendolyn or other names that begin with Gwen and mean white or blessed. The color white is often associated with purity, perfection, honesty, cleanliness, and beginnings. This could tie into Kurumi's unending optimism and how she refuses to give up. Kurumi's design isn't as flashy or intricate as most of the other significant characters, but that doesn't mean there aren't some neat little details I can point out. She's always seen wearing her school uniform, which pretty plainly shows her position as a student of Aetheria Academy. Kurumi's eyes have a design in them like a lot of the other characters do, but I can't quite tell what it is. Kind of resembles a flower, but it also kind of looks like crosshairs. If her eyes are meant to look like flowers, then the symbolism is a bit too vague to narrow down. Specific flowers have more specific meanings, but in general, flowers are often a symbol of love and beauty. If her eyes are meant to look like crosshairs, it could tie into her determination to find any information she wants. Crosshairs are meant to aid with aiming a firearm, so once she locks onto something, she doesn't turn away from it. Kurumi is always wearing a headband with a pink flower design. This is likely just a generic flower shape, but to me, it kind of resembles the shape of a daisy. Daisies often symbolize innocence, and Kurumi is optimistic despite the dreary state of Kanai Ward. Daisies are also viewed as a symbol of a girl's first love, which would make sense because Kurumi is implied to have feelings for Yuma. And on top of all that, daisies are also a symbol of cheerfulness, which again ties into Kurumi's personality. Pink daisies specifically, which would match the color of her headband, are symbols of love or romance. Whenever she's outdoors, Kurumi wears a heavy raincoat. If I recall correctly, this coat was gifted to her by her grandfather. It has a strawberry on the back and a green apple on the left arm. Strawberries are often associated with love, particularly the romantic kind, which again references Kurumi's feelings for Yuma. Apples are often used as symbols of love, marriage, spring, youth, longevity, and immortality. Those last two or three definitely fit since Kurumi is a homunculus and therefore effectively immortal. I like Kurumi's design. It's simple, but I don't see any problems with that. The small details like her headband and the designs on her coat are really nice little details that add to her character. Kurumi is very friendly and sociable. She easily gets along with other people, and she doesn't like saying anything that could outright offend anyone. She particularly gets along quickly with both Yuma and Fubuki. Although she doesn't seem to like Tetsuhiko that much, and who can blame her, she still tolerates him and doesn't make a fuss about it. Kurumi's in-game profile describes her as seeking out anything she wants to know with unwavering tenacity, which shows her determined nature. She rarely hesitates to push forward and continue towards her goal. This can be a problem, like when she rushes off in the restricted area to follow Aiko and ends up making Yuma worry about her. It also might have gotten her in trouble with the Peacekeepers once because she mentions being chased by them at some point. Despite everything she endures, Kurumi remains hopeful and optimistic. realistic. She's shaken by some events like Kaden's onstage death and encountering the zombies in the restricted area, but she still keeps pushing forward and doesn't let it get her down. Even though she's undoubtedly grieving the loss of her friend, she would still stop at nothing to find the answers around Aiko's death. Although she's not a detective, Kurumi seems smart enough to be one, as is even pointed out by Yuma. Her knowledge as a native of Kanai Ward gives her access to a lot of information about the city. She often makes suggestions or deductions that are either correct or offer a new way of looking at things. Overall, Kurumi is a very nice and likable character. She's so pleasant and sweet that it's hard not to like her, and she's very easy to root for. Her personality isn't as fleshed out as those of some of the other characters, but I don't think it really has to be. She's most likely intended to be more of a minor or side character, so it's not a huge problem to me that her personality is more on the simpler side. Kurumi is introduced in Chapter 2. Shinigami notices her trailing Yuma, and they both work together to catch her. She then introduces herself and admits she just really wanted a chance to talk to a detective. Although she has information on Amaterasu's secret research, she doesn't just give it up and instead offers it as payment for hiring Yuma to work on a case. She introduces him to her school, Aetheria Academy, and explains that the death of her best friend Aiko was ruled a suicide. Kurumi, however, doesn't believe this and instead thinks someone in the theater club must have something to do with Aiko's death. Later on, Kurumi is arrested by the peacekeepers for the sudden death of Kaden. This gives Yuma more motivation to solve the case, because if he doesn't, Kurumi goes to jail for a crime she didn't commit, and she would likely suffer a lot under the peacekeepers. At the end of the case, Kurumi is freed, and she hugs Yuma as she thanks him for saving her. She accompanies him to the roof of the old agency building. There, she reveals herself as Kanai Ward's only informant and gives Yuma the first bits of information about the homunculus research. Kurumi is then seen again in Chapter 3 when she runs into Yuma and Fubuki as they're evading the peacekeepers. She checks the resistance hideout for any important information. Though she returns with no documents or records, she brings copied security footage that shows the culprit of Shachi's murder could not have used the emergency stairs. Kurumi then accompanies Yuma and Fubuki to the power plant and helps them look around. All three are cornered by the peacekeepers, but things are resolved when the other detectives show up and the case has been closed. Yuma is pretty upset and doubtful after the case is over, but Kurumi reassures him by telling him she'll always believe he did the right thing. When Vivia mentions the secret lab at the end of the chapter, Kurumi offers to help look for it. This carries over into the start of Chapter 4, where she and Yuma are still looking for the lab. She's the one that mentions and makes the suggestion that the secret lab could be located in the restricted area. When it seems like she and Yuma are out of leads, Kurumi suggests talking to Makoto because he is Amaterasu's CEO. Makoto offers to bring one of them to the secret lab, and Kurumi volunteers to go, but Yuma insists on going instead. This makes her very worried about him, and she tells him to come back safe before he leaves. After the mess in the lab and Yako's death, Kurumi talks to Yuma on the roof of the old agency building. She admits she looked into Yako's past and gives more details and information about his wife's death and the motivation behind his actions. Later, she's knocked out by the gas along with everyone else in the submarine. In Chapter 5, she joins Yuma in the restricted area as they look around and start to uncover the secrets about Kanai Ward. She's shocked to see the zombies, and then even more shocked to learn that they're homunculi. At one point, she becomes separated from Yuma, and he frantically searches for her. When they reunite, she admits that she went after Aiko. By talking to her, she finally had a chance to say goodbye to her friend. This is also when she gives Yuma information about the Peacekeeper's forced blood test and the blank week mystery. Then Kurumi makes her exit from Chapter 5 when Yuma briefly turns off the rain machine and causes her to pass out from exposure to sunlight. Kurumi reappears as the playable character in the epilogue. She moves around the city and talks to other residents about the changes that have happened over the past few months. This is how we learn that the city has opened up and the residents chose for Makoto to remain as their leader. As she walks around, she buys a raincoat, some body cream for protection from the sun, instant ramen that can provide all the nutrients a homunculus needs, and a map. She heads to the Nocturnal Detective Agency to say goodbye to the detectives. She reveals she's going to travel to search for Yuma, who just kind of disappeared after his confrontation with Makoto. She refuses to say goodbye to Yuma because she just really enjoys being with him. After the detectives leave, she thanks Yako and the agency for allowing her to have so many important experiences. Kurumi gets on a train to leave Kanai Ward. She reads a letter from Yuma, which reveals that he left the Book of Death with her and asked her to hold onto it until he returns. Despite being immortal, though, she's too impatient to wait, and so she sets out to find him. Kurumi is Kanai Ward's only informant, and she took over the role from her grandfather after he went missing. She possesses a lot of skills skills that an informant would find useful. She's friendly and gets along with others easily, so she has a little trouble getting information out of people. Her in-game profile says she's good at tailing suspects, which is supported by the fact that Yuma didn't notice her following him until Shinigami pointed her out. Kurumi takes pride and holds confidence in her role as an informant. She's willing to rush into danger to find the information she wants or needs, and she's not easily deterred by obstacles. As an informant, Kurumi acts as a source of a lot of information throughout the game. Being a native of Kanai Ward, she has a greater understanding of how it works and what happens within it. She holds strongly to everything her grandfather told her and uses his words and teachings as the basis for a lot of her processes and deductions. Kurumi is shown to have a pretty strong disdain for how the Peacekeepers cover up the truth. Her in-game profile lists her dislike as information manipulation. This makes sense because she's been personally harmed by this sort of thing. Peacekeepers hid the truth behind Aiko's death, which left her without a sense of closure. Perhaps because of this, she believes that searching for and exposing the truth is always the right thing to do. Kurumi has a strong and important bond with Yuma. She first approached him because she wanted to speak with a detective due to her lifelong admiration of them. After Yuma saves her from being arrested by the Peacekeepers, she becomes even more attached to him. As mentioned through her profile, she holds a lot of trust in him. Throughout the game, Kurumi acts as a consistent source of motivation and optimism for Yuma. Whenever he starts to doubt himself, Kurumi cheers him up and reassures him that he's doing the right thing. Kurumi is pretty heavily implied to have romantic feelings for Yuma. She blushes and seems very embarrassed when someone like Desuhiko or Yako implies that they have feelings for each other. She seems jealous when she sees Yuma and Fubuki holding hands. And in the epilogue, she tells the bookshop owner that the reason she wants a map of the world has to do with a high school girl's crush. On the other side, Yuma's feelings towards Kurumi are a bit more ambiguous. He does seem just as embarrassed as her at implications that they're a couple or they have feelings for one another. At the very least, he definitely cares about her and he trusts her enough to leave the Book of Death with her. But the more important thing here is that she most likely has feelings for him. Kurumi's relationship with Yuma is even more interesting if you consider her as a sort of parallel to Yako. Both Kurumi and Yako are Kanai Ward natives, but they have very different outlooks about the city. Yako is far more pessimistic. He experienced multiple tragedies that eroded his optimism and hope for a better future. He believes detectives can't save the city and they aren't superheroes or anything. Kurumi, on the other hand, has maintained her cheerfulness and optimism despite everything she has endured. She holds a strong admiration for detectives and even calls them heroes on multiple occasions. I think Kurumi is far more than just a simple cute girl love interest. She and Yako each offer different yet equally important perspectives for Yuma. While Yako's is admittedly more realistic and practical given the circumstances, I think Kurumi's optimism and reassurance is what Yuma really needed. She really helped him believe in himself and keep moving forward. Kurumi is a very nice character. At first I thought she would just be a Chapter 2 exclusive and then never show up again, but her appearances in the later chapters were a very nice, pleasant surprise. She seems like a pretty easy character to dismiss. There's not a whole lot of depth to her personality or character, and I can see why someone might view her as boring or unimpressive. But she's undeniably important in a lot of different ways. The entirety of Chapter 2 wouldn't have happened without her, and that would suck a lot because most people agree that that's one of the best chapters in the game. A lot of details about Amaterasu and Kanai Ward come directly from her, and without her reassurance, Yuma would have struggled way more to keep his head up, and he could have been in a very different state of mind by the end of the game. There's a pretty common theory floating around that if Raincode gets a sequel, Kurumi might be the protagonist. To my knowledge, a sequel has not been confirmed, but if it is, I personally wouldn't mind seeing her as the main character. But I'm also perfectly fine with it if there is no sequel. I'm quite satisfied with the story the way that it is. That's about all I've got to say. Kurumi is very nice, and I like her a lot. She's a neat addition to the main group since she kind of helps to mellow out the eccentric personalities of some of the other characters. I hope you enjoyed this examination of Kurumi Wendy. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and have a good day!